Okie dokie. The budget. This is the most dreaded form of all the papers that I've seen for most students, and I can confirm it sucks. But there's a couple ways that we can approach it. First of all, your budget generally should be at least 2 pages long. You can technically get it in all on one page, but generally speaking, especially for for the 20 pagers, you may even want 3 pages. Generally, 3 pages is the highest I would go though. So this is the first page of the budget. It is clearly understood, it's easily broken down, and one of the best things you can include is the big idea. English is a left to right, up, down language. Even if somebody is a non-native English reader, they are taught to learn it that way because that's just how the language works. And as a result, we try to make sure that we're taking advantage of that. We're going to use some of these psychological phenomena. I'll go over that in my prop video, but we can start with this. The big idea goes down vertically and it shows the positive, the negative, the total, and it ends on a positive. By the way, if your ROI is not between 250 to maybe 375, it's probably too high or too low. If you're doing a charity campaign, it'll probably be on the lower side, maybe 250 to maybe 300. If you're doing corporate, it's probably gonna be closer to 300 to 400. Try to keep it lower. If you have to artificially deflate it with increased spending, absolutely do. So here are some of the things that this paper does well. This is banding. Banding is the use of alternating different background colors in order to create categorization. Light background, dark background, light background, and then you can use your white background here in order to delineate through categories. That's awesome. Breaking it down into larger categories is unorthodox. This is not a normal expense sheet. However, you don't have that many pages or that much time to convince your judge that your numbers line up. Doing something like this is a great way to do it. If you have subcategories, just tab them over. Like I said, it's unorthodox, but it's clean, it works. Don't be like me and alternate between using cents and whole numbers. That's not good. Also, split proceeds. I did a charity event, so I should have given more explanation because otherwise this can get confusing. When you are looking at amounts, you don't necessarily have to do this, but do try to have higher amounts up front and then lower them as you go. I did not follow this for all of these, but specifically with this larger category of digital media, especially starting with those higher numbers, moving your way down, it does help. Not a hard and fast rule, but it does help. Moving on to the second page. Having a unique part of your budget is a really great way to earn points, both overall and in the budget category. Specifically, looking at an agency fee and initial expense coverage. They are often overlooked, but they are so helpful, especially if you're doing an IMC. Though honestly, initial expense coverage should be on every single paper, in my opinion. Agency fees are on total spend. That's advertising, that's anytime you have to pay money to promote yourself. The judge is going to be approaching this as if they are a member of the company, and generally speaking, you are presenting yourself as if you are an outside marketing agency. Outside marketing agencies do not do this out of the goodness of their heart. Incorporate a media spend. If you want to bring it down, find a reasonable way. Generally speaking, marketing agencies charge 15%, and that's low. Larger marketing companies will charge 20, maybe even sometimes I've seen 23%, or as low as 12% if they're a nonprofit. Generally speaking, don't position yourself as a nonprofit because it makes it look like you're trying to skirt your budget. You have to have a rational reason as to why you are lowering your fee if you are. Initial expense coverage. Every part of your budget has to come from somewhere eventually. Initially, who is covering the money? Is it a reallocated budget? Is it your marketing budget? Is it you had a surplus? Explain where the original money comes from. And then additionally, tell us when you are going to switch over to actually having the campaign pay for it. If the campaign is not paying for your expenses, you are losing money, and a judge does not want that. Goodness gracious. Sorry, I've been talking a lot. COGS are something that a lot of students overlook, but you really shouldn't. You should have at least this information: cost per, sell for, profit each, expected quantity, revenue. You can give more information, but try not to give any less. If your cost per looks low, even if it was accurate, inflate it. I actually had to do that for mine. I did a lot of research. I wasn't able to find the actual material suppliers for Dr. Martens. They do a lot of their manufacturing in-house as well. I think they might do their fabric and leather manufacturing in-house as well. So I ended up having to call a bunch of different manufacturers. I probably spent a whole week chasing down leads. And because of economies of scale, which are awesome, this cost per ended up like $3 to $5 cheaper for each of these. However, Doc Martens sells their products for a high cost, and because that is known, that's not something you can adjust. So you have to adjust the thing that your judge probably doesn't have the information on, which is the cost per. As well as quantity, it's good to aim high when you are a national brand like this campaign. But generally speaking, you do want to remain a little conservative too, which I know it's antithetical to each other, but when it comes to charity specifically, try to aim high, but then also put it into the scope of the overall campaign. This was the last part of my budget and the part that I'm the least excited about. The charity breakdown is strong. I don't like the graphics. I would redo that. The thematic tie-in, however, here, this is all ethos. If you have your section that's too logos heavy, too logical, your judge's eyes are going to glaze over. Having bits and pieces here and there talking about how to humanize your budget does help. Once again, especially when you are doing a campaign such as this, when you're focusing on a social activism issue. There's a lot of confusing wording on this page, and I probably would redo that, and it could use for a graphic overhaul. 50-50 split proceeds, because this is half of the money going to the corporation and half of the money going to the charity. I didn't properly explore this, and I feel like I'm lucky that I scored as high because I feel like this should have at least docked me a point. It's well thought out. The numbers back up. I spent about a month on the numbers, but I would just be very cognizant about what you are putting in terms of text in your budget, because your text will be very numbers heavy. Okay, I got an 8 out of an 8. I would give myself an 8 out of 8. I think the overall attention to detail and professionalism is high, especially since now I've spent a couple of years reviewing other papers and I've seen ICDC papers and I've seen how other people do their budgets. I think that it's pretty on par for what a judge expects, and the score kind of implies that. I do think if I had the option to redo it, I would redo certain graphics. I feel like they're unclear, they're confusing, and then that contributes to an overall confusion, which makes it difficult for a judge to reference back. Just kind of tying back into that, if there's too much visual stimuli, it overwhelms your judge. Another really fun thing to consider about the budget is that if you are doing a contingency fund, it's good to explain why you put that much money into your contingency fund. And with that, that is about everything that I have to talk about in budget.